Welcome, everybody. My name is Leah Sanchez, and I'm the head of programs and outreach at the Textile Museum of Canada. So thank you for joining us for this Teach-In Mending with Patches with Allie Davis. Before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that the land on which the Textile Museum of Canada operates is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work here and through our activities seek to create a space for people to share, learn, and celebrate the textile practices of today and long ago in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So I'd like to introduce you now to Allie. Sorry, I accidentally muted you, Allie. You need to unmute yourself, I think. So Allie is our public programming assistant, and I don't have an introduction prepared, Allie, so if you could just introduce yourself, please. Yeah, but Allie has been with us for 2 months, and we're excited to have them do this workshop.
Great, thank you so much, Leah. I'm just going to remove your spotlight. Hi, everyone. So I'm so excited to be here doing my first teach-in with you all. This is the second in our mending series, and it's mending with patches. So just as a little intro or disclaimer, I'm new to mending myself. I've been mending for about 2 years, and it's something really exciting that I enjoy doing a lot. So I hope you share your joy with me and we can work together and do some amazing mending. I am going to share my screen. I have a small presentation prepared just to kind of introduce the concept and some visual inspiration for you all. I hope you can hear me and see the screen well. So this is Mending with Patches. My name's Allie Davis. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the programming assistant at the Textile Museum of Canada. And this has been an amazing 2 months. So Leah, if you could just give audio confirmation that you're seeing my screen, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you so much. So Sashiko is something I've just begun pretty recently, about 2 years, as I said. And it's this really beautiful form of mending. The word Sashiko translates to little stops, which refers to the running stitch. And some people like to mend the stitch size about the size of a grain of rice. So this method of repair, which is patches and stitch on top of usually indigo dyed or denim fabric, was developed purely with practicality so that clothing could become warmer, stronger, and be passed down over generations. So with more and more repairs over the lifetime of the garment, the piece will actually become more decorated, stronger, warmer, and just better than it was before. So these are some terms you might see if you search Sashiko online. There's a moezashi, which is the pattern created with long lines of running stitch, hitomizashi, which is single stitches made on a grid, and then boro means tattered, and that's the fabric that's had many repairs done to it. So the image on the right is a boro kimono from Sri Threads. So they're a great resource as well, and they have lots of beautiful images of boro kimono. You might have noticed, if you're interested in Sashiko before this workshop, that you'll often see indigo dyed fabrics. And this isn't a coincidence. It's because indigo dyeing, cotton farming, and Sashiko stitching all began in Japan around the same time, the early 1600s. So during this period, the Edo period, the lower class was actually forbidden from wearing silks, vibrant colors, or large patterns. So this is a lower class technique that was developed so people could share their favorite patterns and mend with pride and have something visible and beautiful on their garment. Indigo dyeing works especially well with cotton. It's one of the natural dyes that adheres to cotton the best, and natural indigo is actually an insect repellent, which is why it was worn so often by farmers on the field. So it was really a utilitarian style of garment, style of dyeing and stitch. where we have elevated it today to be a more art form, it actually had a very humble beginning. And I think it's important that people realize, especially in Western society, that this came from the lower class, and it's something that we've recently kind of taken on as an art form, but it was something done out of practicality and necessity. So it's actually really beautiful how something so utilitarian has really turned into an art form of its own. The image on the right was made by Sashiko Story. You might find them on Instagram at Sashiko Story or Sashiko, CO. They're an amazing website, and they have lots of images and tools to help you with your Sashiko journey as well. So please check them out. They're on YouTube as well. So not only have, Western people also kind of taken on this technique and really enjoyed using this technique, but in Japan, it's had a revival where more kind of expensive brands are making boro pieces. So the brand Capital with a K, they really sell a lot of beautiful boro pieces and develop patchwork for sale, and they've really elevated it as well. So these are two contemporary pieces that they've produced recently. So before I even started learning Sashiko, I actually just enjoyed practicing the stitches. So I think it's important to get comfortable with sewing or embroidering on its own before you start working on something that may be more precious to you. I mean, it's okay to make mistakes and work as you go, but if you feel more comfortable, it might be a good idea to stitch on some cloth for practice or make your own patches first before you just jump right on to working on a piece. There are also lots of templates you can get online for Sashiko. I found this website, The Spruce Crafts, and they have lots and lots of free templates that you can trace. And there are also Sashiko stencils you can buy, paper ones, plastic and wooden ones, so that you can trace your pattern with chalk onto the fabric before you even stitch. So this could be extremely helpful, especially if you're like me, you're a little bit awkward with the measuring and things. This is an amazing way to get that technique. And it's just, yeah, they're just really stunning, beautiful, and it's a lot less work than measuring it out yourself. So I highly recommend buying some stencils if it's something you want to give a try. I'm actually a natural dyer by trade. That's my preferred practice. So I kind of came into Sashiko by working with thread and patches, dyeing them together in the same pot, and then trying to find use for them. So I thought, like, since I had all this beautiful embroidery floss and fabrics that were matching colors, what would be a more appropriate use for them than mending with the same fabric and thread. So they match well, and it's an easy way to coordinate. If you want your garment to look cohesive and you have matching thread and fabric, that's a really easy way to get started. The piece on the left was done with madder, but the piece on the right was done with goldenrod. So it's very accessible. It's forageable this season in Toronto. I mean, there's some right outside the window next to me, so it's very easy to find. You can get it just about anywhere you look. And if you dye some fabric and some embroidery floss, you're good to go. And once I had kind of worked on Sashiko for a little bit, I started to get better at it. It's not something that you'll be able to do easily right away. I mean, maybe you have better luck than me, but for me, it took a little bit of practice. So I've started working with more of those traditional patterns where I first began just doing running stitch. And the piece on the right are a pair of shorts I've been working on for a long time. So I've had a few different repairs. And I started to just do plain patches on them. I think it can look really great. It adds like my own personal touch to them, and they match better with my own clothing. I like to wear a lot of these black and burgundy, so it matches really well. And it's also something that really makes me appreciate the garment, which hasn't been holding up very well, and now it's going to have a much longer life. So if you want to work more on Sashiko after this workshop is over, I'll be sharing the recording with all of you. And these are some of my resources. So a few of these books we have in the Textile Museum shop. Mending Life is a really great source, and we have that in stock. Mending Matters is one of my favorite books. And Sashiko by Jill Clay is one of my favorite books, and I'll be showing that to you shortly. Slow Stitch by Claire Wellesley Smith. Sashiko Story, who I previously mentioned. He has a YouTube, a website, a blog, so he's really out there helping everyone. with his more traditional Japanese perspective, and the sprucecrafts.com for those tutorials and other things that might help you out. Okay, so I'm back. Thank you so much for watching. I'm just going to show you this book, and because it's really helped me so much. So it's Sashiko by Jill Clay, and she also includes some really, really great patterns in here. Let me find one. So she has actually done herself some large patterns you can kind of trace on. She has projects in here that are really helpful, and these full page patterns which you could copy, or you can make your own stencil out of them, which I haven't tried yet, but I'm definitely going to. And it really helps, I think, seeing these different kind of options that you could do and some different projects you could work on. She's done an apron. She's also included some grid paper in here, and grid paper is super, super helpful. So I'm going to remove the spotlight, and I'm going to spotlight my other camera. Okay, great. So hopefully you can see a little bit of my face, a little bit of spotlight this too. Great, so you can see me and you can see my fabric a little bit. So I've actually gotten these amazing patches from the Reuse Center at the Learning Hub, which is something we just started a few weeks ago. So if you're looking for a secondhand fabric, I really recommend coming into the museum and taking a look. That's usually where I am. I can come help you find some patches for your project. I got these amazing gingham waterfalls. So they have tons and tons of really, really beautiful fabric on here. And they're cotton. Something that's really important as well is to try to use your cotton denim, your cotton garment, and then a cotton fabric for the patch and a cotton thread for your embroidery thread, hopefully. If you have all three of those, they really go the best together. They stay the strongest together. And that's kind of part of the ethos of Sashiko, is that you use all cotton because that's what they use traditionally. But of course, Sashiko just refers to the mending. So as long as you're mending with purpose, with patches and stitch, you're doing it right. There's no like one way to do it. I have kind of pre-cut some pieces here, you know, like they do on TV. So I got yellow. I thought this really matches well with the denim. And I have some indigo dyed threads that I actually got from a natural dyer on Etsy. So that's really great. I also recommend Etsy for buying your Sashiko supplies. They have natural dyers who dye threads. There's special needles, fabrics, all that kind of thing. So it's really great. They've made it totally accessible for all of us. All right, so yeah, I've actually got special Sashiko needles as well. The only difference between these and like your standard needle are they're quite thicker. So if you compare them side by side, it's quite a bit thicker. It's almost like a denim needle or a wool needle if you have tapestry supplies. I would say it's 2 or 3 times thicker than your standard needle, but most importantly, it's a lot longer. So this allows you to get that perfect long running stitch, which is essential for this type of mending. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to reach under and on top of the garment over and over again. I brought some wax with me just to show you beeswax. Typically, that's used for like bookbinding and things if you look at the bookbinding section in your craft store. And I think it's particularly good for embroidery floss. If you have to use embroidery floss or sewing thread, you might want to consider coating it with wax. And it just helps it a little bit tougher and a little bit smoother to pull through the denim.
How would you coat it with wax, Allie?
Oh yeah, I can do a little demonstration.
Rub it, or do you have to melt it?
Yeah, so I actually have, can you see? So you can see it, there's actually where I've rubbed it through, there are some slashes in the wax. So you actually just kind of pull it like a little bit tight against the wax and tug it. so that it just kind of slides through. And this Sashiko thread doesn't need any kind of coating or anything, but it's really helpful if your thread is like tough and doesn't want to go through, which I've had happen before, especially embroidery floss. It kind of crumbles and knots a little bit. It's like not the best material. The Sashiko needle also has an eye that's wide enough for the thread, but it's not so wide that it will tear the fabric. Like the actual eye doesn't come out bigger than the needle, so it's not creating a bigger hole. I'm just threading my needle. And typically also when you buy Sashiko embroidery floss or thread, it comes in a giant loop, similar to how you would get for weaving, which is really great because you want to get as big of a piece as you want to work with at a time. And a lot of people also say that you don't knot the thread for Sashiko, but it's kind of a misinterpretation of things over time. So like decorative embroidery, you also don't typically knot. And the only reason for this is if you have to show the back and the front of the garment, you want it to look beautiful. You don't want to be seeing all kinds of knots on the back of your piece. And this, of course, has a utilitarian use as well, right? But when we're working on denim, the last thing that you want is for it to all come apart. And I've had that happen with knots. You want it to be very strong. You don't want to be worried about if it's gonna constantly be unraveling on you, especially because a lot of denim nowadays isn't completely denim. It isn't completely cotton. It's actually like mixtures of things like elastic as well, synthetic fabrics. So it's a lot more easy to break than your standard piece of cotton. Okay, so I made just a tiny knot with the tail up here. And then I've also knotted the end. And so I didn't double this over the way I would with embroidery floss. I've just done one thread. And I think that's all that you'll really need for this step. So I've got my yellow patch. I've got my garment with a big hole in it. I've already cut out where the hole would be. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer here. So I've already cut out like a giant hole. And that's where there was a lot of elastic and things around the knee, and it was really unpleasant to wear. So I've kind of pre-cut that. And it's really up to you whether you want to fold the raw edge of the fabric inside or if you want to keep it kind of stylistically fraying outward. That's just like a personal decision on what you think looks the best. I like to do a combination of both. So in this case, I think I'm going to fold it inside so that we see more of the yellow kind of poking through. And Leah may have mentioned earlier, if you have any questions for me, you can leave them in the chat and Leah can read them out to me, or you can unmute yourself and say it out loud. I would love to see your videos if you're working alongside me. I'm going to switch to gallery view so I can see if any of you are working with me. And if you brought your projects along today, I would love to hear about them. I've used this technique on denim a few times, but I've also mended shirts. I think it works great like under the arm or as like an inner thigh patch on pants. And it's really all about that visible mending. So kind of creating more personality and adding a bit of yourself into it, which is why I like to do the natural dyeing and like dye my pieces so they have a bit more of that like special history to them. You could also embroider them yourself with a pattern that you like and then just kind of patch them on top. So it really has like your own personality. You could add beading, you can get really creative with this stuff. So I'm just going to open up the leg of the pants and slide the patch in. And some people like to work with the patch cut to size. I prefer to afterwards just kind of trim it to the area so that I don't cut away too much and then I'm worrying about fraying and stuff. And this is a really good piece also because it already has a grid, of course. Gingham already has stripes to it, so it's something you can follow when you're working on your on your stitch, which is really great. So you don't have to draw as many lines and things like that. So,
Allie, a question.
Yeah.
Allie, so it's Victoria. I just wondered if you finished the edge of the patch. So is the patch a raw edge as well?
Yeah, this particular patch is a raw edge. You could sew it, especially on a machine. You could tuck your edge, but that's just kind of a comfort thing. What do you think looks the best? What feels the best against your skin? Like, I find it a little less intrusive if it's just flat against my skin and not so bulky, but that's just kind of a personal preference over wearing my patched items and what I kind of prefer. But it's really up to what makes you the most comfortable. And I'm just going to kind of pin it lightly in place, and then I'm going to go in and turn the edges of my denim. It also might help to baste it with a machine. So if you want to sew it in with synthetic thread and kind of cut out your basting stitches after, that's something you can do. Once you already have the Sashiko stitching, it'll be totally stuck and you won't need to worry about it anymore, but it might help while you're working on your design or your process. This piece of fabric is basically the perfect size. It's really big. It covers the whole knee without any, moving it around. So I'm just doing a few kind of loose pins so that it doesn't move around too much. And also with the pointy side sticking outside because my hand is inside the pants and I don't want to stick myself with pins. So I'm just going to roll the edge under very loosely. Something important with Sashiko as well is that you're supposed to move the fabric or move the needle and not the fabric. So you want everything to be movable within the patch. So you're just kind of creating that running stitch going along, but then not actually bunching the fabric too much. And what garments are you mending today? If anyone's mending along with me, are you mending jeans? Are you mending shorts? Do you have like an apron or something?
I see Haley with the jeans. Sorry.
Beautiful.
I'm mending my jeans as well, but the hole that I have is a little ragged. Is it better to have a rounded off hole?
That's a good question. I guess it would depend if you want it to be a certain shape or not. I just kind of cut mine in an ovular kind of shape and then fold the edges in. I think the easiest shape would be like a square or something. Then you could kind of just tuck the edges in. But it's all just personal preference, really. And sometimes the ragged edge looks good. Like I see a lot of people online that mend with a ragged edge. They like it to have just the patch like peeking through. So that can be cute too, if that's your style. I've done a combination of both.
And the thing with this patch is that it's in a spot where I seem to think I need more room. Yeah. So maybe it should stay ragged so that the hole itself is a little bit bigger than it started. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. You could leave it some room to kind of fray open and make your patch larger underneath. Yeah. That could be cool. Yeah. I think on this particular pair of jeans where I have both knees cut open and I have some holes up here too, they're an ongoing project. And I think I'm going to use different combinations of yellow fabric. And I'm also going to have one that goes over the whole knee, like a whole square on one knee and then kind of peeking out under this knee. So it's fun to like play with that too. I've repaired these a few times. You can kind of see I have like stitch marks all through these. They're quite rough. I've done them a few times. And now that I've kind of looked into the history and the importance of Sashiko, I'm realizing that really the proper way is just to continue mending over and over and not actually do what I've done, which is take out the patches and take out the stitches. I think it would be better in the future if I just continue my mending on top. So it's kind of these fun layers of fabric and layers of stitches. So it becomes this really big big piece, almost like a quilt, right? When you work on it for like years and years. Yeah, it can be quite beautiful. That's the real thing I love about the Boro kimonos, is because you can tell they have so much history behind them. I don't think I'm going to do like a pattern. I think I'm going to do kind of some rows of stitches maybe. So I have my quilting ruler here, and I think these are the best because you can really see the whole thing underneath. You're not like struggling to find what you're looking at. And I'm going to use this chalk marker that's specifically for sewing, so they wash out. But I mean, white chalk works as well. And I'm going to go above and past where the patch is, so that you're fully integrating the patch with the denim. So there shouldn't be any areas where the patch is like kind of loose on its own, if that makes sense. You can always trim off your excess at the end.
Okay, I got it.
So I'm going to do kind of some smaller rows. So it's a little more delicate than what I typically would do.
So you're drawing out the line of the stitches? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm
The
making
grid
kind of
or the line?
not quite a grid, but just some lines
Yeah.
to start. And it doesn't have to be perfect at all. I've seen a lot of discussion online about like what makes something true Sashiko and you know, slow stitch and all these process, but actually slow stitch is kind of a more Western concept. And the whole idea with Sashiko in the beginning was to mend it quickly so that the person could get back to working with the garment. So if you want to work with the spirit of slow stitch and making it something super beautiful, that's really awesome. Or you can kind of work quickly, get back to wearing them, and then mend them as you go. It's really, I feel like it's all personal preference because it's your garment. So it's whatever you like the best. Just part of the beauty is like personalizing it to yourself.
So
Louise mentioned weight. Yeah, yarn weight.
Question.
Perfect. So I think we are going to be selling Sashiko kits. That's something I was talking with the shop about, and I think that would be great. About the weight of the patch compared to the weight of the garment. Yeah, so you want to have something kind of similar in weight. Same with the actual thread that you're using to actually sew it in. You're almost like weaving it back together. You're almost like creating one piece that's more cohesive. So you want things to be a similar weight, but it's totally okay to use a heavier weight too. It's just that when you continue to mend things, if you use too heavy of a fabric, it's going to feel very bulky when you're wearing it. The more thread you incorporate, the more patches you incorporate, then it kind of becomes where your jeans like knees are heavier than the rest of the pants, if that makes sense. So again, if you think like if you work in the garden and you want it to be really rough on the knees, that totally makes sense to me. Yeah. But if you want it to feel more like your original jeans felt, then you want to pick something of a similar weight.
Susan's asking how close together are your lines?
So, oh great, my lines are actually 1/8 of an inch.
1/8 of an inch?
Yeah.
Is that what he said? Yeah.
Yeah, on my quilting ruler, that's what it says. But I was just kind of eyeballing it, so I'm actually impressed that it's actually 1/8 of an inch and not like some random interval. And of course, this is also on a gingham, so it has its own lines, but the chalk will start to rub away and go away the longer you do it. So I'm just going to start stitching and then add some more lines as I go. So we're thinking about the grain of rice, right, in the size of our stitches, but it's totally okay to have them be rough, to have them be more random. Again, the slow stitch concept is something that Americans kind of came up with. It's not as much of the original kind of Japanese way of doing things, which was just that it's a way of taking care of our garments. And I think first and foremost, we're taking care of the fabric. So it's not as much about what it looks like. But of course, if you're an aestheticist like I am, you might care what it looks like. So it did take a little bit to tug it through the first time, but my thread is almost the same color as the denim. Let me see if I can get it so you can see. So this indigo dyed thread is really close to the same kind of color. I'm gonna move a little bit closer.
Can you bring it closer?
Better, yeah.
That's indigo dyed thread?
Yeah, it's a
Looks
natural
great.
indigo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it matches really well,
Mhm.
which is beautiful. And again, I'm still a novice at this, but you want to move your needle in and out as opposed to the fabric. So with that really long Sashiko needle, it's a lot easier to do. And you do, you know, 4 or 5 running stitches. Now I know in the last session, Jan kind of covered the basics of the mending stitches, but if you need a running stitch explained, I am happy to do that. It's more of just picking your needle up and putting it back in, just close to where you started it. I'm struggling because of that big knot I put in, so I am gonna have to get rid of my knot, unfortunately. Let me see if I can pull it through. There we go.
You're starting your stitching a long way from the actual patch.
Yes, I am. So I can feel that the patch underneath is actually quite far away. It's down to here.
Oh, I
Far from
see.
the hole. So
Uh-huh.
I'm going in a couple inches from the edge, and then I'm starting another couple inches from the actual patch. And this is for the structural integrity of the fabric. So the fabric has started to weaken all around here. It's not just where the hole is. There are little tears kind of all over here. So having a little bit of extra space is really going to help make it a lot stronger in the future. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of this knot, and then I'm going to go through the tail. So kind of an old school embroidery or sewing technique. You actually put the needle through the thread. So I can do it with this really strong thread. It's like 5 ply or something very thick. Okay, great. So you catch the thread here and you pull it through. So then there's just a tiny little catch there, just one of the threads. And Sashiko thread is also several threads wound together, similarly to embroidery floss, but they're not meant to be split. They're all kind of twirled together the way yarn is. And of course, I should be removing my pins as I go to make more room for my hands. So get a little bit closer. That's better. So I'm going to be dipping the needle in and out right on my pink line. And it's quite tough, of course. You're going through, in my case, a full layer of denim and a full layer of cotton. So it's not speedy. It's really a mindful kind of meditative type of sewing. It would be so much more fun in person because we could all, you know, sit together and mend together. But on the Zoom, we do get a little bit of the visual of each other's work. So I'm happy a few of you brought things to mend along with me. And now that I've done some on the yellow, you can see the stitch poking through. So here it's much easier. It's just going through one layer of the cotton and not the denim.
Allie, could we go a little closer to your stitch?
Yeah, let me see if I can kind of move this.
Please, thank you.
Maybe I can get it here. So you can actually see now close to the edge, we have some indigo threads poking through.
Thank you.
No
So-
problem at all.
Allie,
Yeah.
I had the same thought earlier. The stitches as long as a grain of rice. Marlene's asking what kind of rice.
I don't know.
Basmati or jasmine? I think
Hmm.
a little short. Well,
I
you're
think
doing
mine's
like what?
long grain.
I think mine is more of the white rice, but not the long grain like the basmati rice. It's more like the short rice. But you know, your stitches can be long or short. It depends what kind of pattern you're doing too. So if you wanted to do something, it might require longer stitches, or it might not. So now that I'm at kind of, oh, there we go. So now that I kind of reached close to the end of my pink line, I'm gonna dip in here and then come out the other end here.
And then there's a bit of a clarification here from Joy. It looks like you're pulling the thread with a needle. I thought you said you pull the thread with a fabric.
Right, so I don't really know how I'd explain that, but it's more like when you're doing a running stitch with quilting, I guess, where you're kind of making many stitches on your needle and then pulling through all the way. Of course, when you're better at it than I am, I'm such a novice. So it's more of the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing where I'm learning. So I know that the best way to do it is to put as many stitches as you can onto your needle. That's why the needle is so long. So then you'll have these kind of tiny pleats that you pull through as opposed to moving the fabric with your hand underneath, if that makes sense.
And it also keeps your stitches the same length. If you
Yeah, it
line them
makes
up
it a
on the
lot
needle,
more-
you can see how long they are.
Yeah, it makes it a lot more aesthetically pleasing if you can do them along the line.
And then Louise is asking if you've tried it with an embroidery hoop.
Oh yes, I
That's a
have.
good
It's
idea.
really
Pros and
nice with
cons.
the embroidery hoop, especially if you want to add your own design. Like if you want to do, I don't know, some cranes or like a large motif, that would look like amazing if you did the hoop to keep it from puckering.
Mhm.
Of course, I'm not quite there yet. I find with the denim, it's really thick if you use the hoop, and it can be really cumbersome to work with. It's easier if you can work with your hand closely because it can be kind of awkward.
Mhm. I've also stuck cardboard into the pant leg just to avoid sewing it shut, like sewing the pant leg shut,
Oh,
just
yeah,
so
that's
I'm not sewing behind. if
yeah.
that
So
makes
see
sense.
here how I've kind of created it's almost like smocking or pleating. So you're kind of doing as many as you can along the line. And now I've reached the denim again, which is great. So it's actually now connecting to the whole piece.
Okay, let's see
It has
that up
waxed-
close.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So now it's coming out of the denim. So we've created a line from here all the way through to here. It's much more structurally sound. It's starting to become part of the denim.
Okay.
Now it's much, much harder to see with the blue on the blue because it is a really similar color. And it's tougher here too. So having a really sharp needle is also crucial. I'm using a brand new needle, so I haven't even used this needle before. So it's super, super pointy, which makes it a lot easier. If you have leather needles, darning needles, that's preferable to just like your standard sewing needle. Okay, so now I've created about 2 rows here, and they're pretty long. You know, it goes pretty far past the patch, but that really helps the integrity of the denim, and you can see it's gapping here. So I'm gonna have to go one further over this way when I'm done, just to make sure everything stays. And I'm gonna stick a pin over here too, to keep it all together. There's like the pointy side up, so it doesn't stick into me. And same as I did on the other side, I'm gonna dip thread in here and come up the 1/8 inch closer on the other side. So you're wanting to use as long of a piece as you can handle without getting it tangled. And you also want to use, as long of a piece as you can, as few knots as you can, and avoid having to kind of bring in more thread if you don't need to, because it's stronger the longer piece that you use. You know, dipping the needle in and out. So I went a little bit too far on this one. I'm actually going to go backwards and then come out a little higher up. So these are all like aesthetic choices you can make for yourself as you're going. And it's also very common for people to backstitch in Sashiko. So that would mean doing it one way and then turning around and doing it, you know, a second or third time over the stitches you've already done to help reinforce that. So that's just whatever you think makes it stronger. So say I've done this mend and then I wear these pants out somewhere and then I rip, you know, the edge over here. Hopefully there are more stitches that will kind of stop that fraying from really happening, but you can also go in and add smaller strengthening stitches here. So I have one of my pairs of shorts that I worked on a little bit, and they have another tear that's just gone into them. So in a couple of seconds, I'm going to show what I'm going to do to strengthen one that's already been mended a couple times. Because when you're wearing your jeans, you know, you need to mend multiple times perhaps. It's not just about being like hard on your clothes, it's also about the sustainability of taking care of your clothes and using it many times and appreciating your clothes for what they are, that you should, you know, take care of them if you can, as long as you can. So I'm going over this frayed edge and I'm just gonna do another stitch to really tack it down. Just being mindful of my pins. So there you go. So I've gone around and done just like a satin stitch just over the edge. And then I can remove the pin that's keeping that in place. Just checking the chat. Great, I'm so glad you're working along with me. So I'm gonna go to the gallery view and just see what you're all doing. It looks like Haley is mending some jeans. I love to see it. And if you have any questions about your particular piece, I would love to see that too. Okay, so I'm going to put these to the side. And then I'm actually going to bring over my black shorts because I think that there's more contrast there and it will look a little bit better on camera. So I showed these in my presentation. They're shorts I've used many times. So they have this kind of basting stitch along the bottom. They have cuffs. This is an example of mending to the point where it really doesn't resemble the original garment at all. It's these were kind of shorter shorts. They had elastic and tearing all over when I bought them. They were just that true like rugged distressed style of jean, which I liked at the time and then I don't really like as much anymore. So of course, as I use them over and over, they really needed a little more care and attention, which is one of the reasons I'm so happy I learned mending. So I have kind of your standard weight embroidery floss here, and it's cotton as well. It's not quite as strong as a Sashiko piece. So I'm going to get double the weight, or double the length, sorry, so that I can double the weight. And I'm also going to use the beeswax here to keep it more solid and keep it from tangling as I go through. See that piece kind of breaking. That's one of the problems you might encounter. I think after this, I'll be purchasing some black Sashiko thread proper, because that could be why I've had to do a few separate repairs on this piece. Perhaps the thread just isn't strong enough to stand up to, you know, that kind of daily wear that I put them through. Sashiko is perfect for the parts of your garment that get the most kind of tension on them because you can repatch over and over. But so I've doubled this piece. And then I'm tying kind of your standard weaving knot at the end because it gets stronger the more that you pull. And you want to leave a little bit of a tail in case the knot comes undone so it doesn't make the integrity of the garment actually suffer. So you can see here I've got a few kind of rips, a few frays coming over the edge. It's thinned a little bit. It's not, this piece of linen, I think it is not quite as strong as the denim, but the denim also has too much elastic in it. It's not a very good, strong piece of denim. So, you know, I'm working with it against me a little bit, but that's okay because I love the shorts. So I want them to stay happy. So the first thing I'm going to do is reinforce this edge I've already done. And I'm going to be doing kind of a loop. So you have the tail here, you can see underneath. And I'm going to go outside the fabric and come out where I put it in. It's similar to a blanket stitch. Horizontally. And it's a great way to show off any fabric that you have sitting at home that you really love but you can't use, any scraps that you have. It's a really sustainable way to work through some of those old fabrics in your collection. Or of course, you can come into the reuse program and we have plenty of scraps to part with for you. And the wax on the thread is really helping it slide through a lot more nicely. So almost like suture stitch.
Allie, what's the reuse program?
Oh, thanks for asking. So it's part of our new learning hub area, which is the renovated area of the museum. And we're selling donated fabric that's been sorted by our volunteers. So what you may have gone to a large sale in the past, we had them outside, we had them, in basements and things. Now we have an actual home for the fabric in the gallery. So we have a whole kind of shopping area now where you can purchase secondhand kind of sustainable fabrics for your projects. Especially things like quilting cotton, which is perfect for something like this.
And just to add that it's not just fabric, we also have like notions, buttons, zippers, like ribbons, trim, patterns,
yeah, that's a good point.
and all kinds of other things. Yeah,
all kinds of things. Lots of
vintage
amazing
household linen.
Yeah.
Well,
some real, like treasures.
Yeah. It's a good place for it.
It's a really fun space. So yes, we do invite you all to come. And we're free admission until end of the year. So.
Oh, I've pricked my finger, so it's a little bit of bleeding. That's my cue to remind you all to wear your thimbles when you're working.
It's part of the natural dyeing.
Yeah, it's my own, putting my own mark on it, literally. Blood, sweat, and tears into my garment.
Allie, sorry, did you answer this question about stretchy fabric to men's stretchy jeans?
Oh, no, I didn't. Could you read that out for me while I get a tissue?
So do you need stretchy fabric to men's stretchy jeans? But then I'm just going to answer the next question. As of October 22, we will be requiring proof of vaccination for all visitors to the museum. Yes.
So if you have to use Band-Aids, use something really cute that goes with your outfit. Make sure you have a box of Band-Aids that bring you joy along with your projects. I always have a big stash of Band-Aids because I haven't quite figured out how thimbles work for me. They're a little bit awkward for my fingers. So I just have a lot of Band-Aids that spark joy that really help.
Hello Kitty Band-Aids.
Yeah, things that are cute that make it less gross, more fun. And when you're going over the hems, it's very thick. So yeah, do be careful there as well. And that's where the wax really helps so that it doesn't.
Where did you get your wax?
Oh, good question. So this is just some beeswax. And I got it with bookbinding supplies. I really enjoy paper binding, bookbinding as well. So I have that left over from a binding project. And I think bookbinding thread might also be a good option for mending because it's quite strong. It's usually like a linen, and any kind of coated, really tough thread works well for Sashiko. So this part is particularly tough. It's really testing me. But I kind of thought that the high contrast of the black on the red will look really cool when it's all finished. Really that visible mending, so it has its own story. So this is the area that needs some extra attention. It's got some tears going here where the hem is kind of coming loose there. Now you can see it a little bit better. So I'm just going to do almost like a similar running stitch just in this area. So I'm going to go kind of up and down and make almost like a little band-aid on the fabric here.
So Allie, about the stretchy fabric
Oh yeah.
or stretchy jeans.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if your jeans were like a true knit, like they have quite a bit of elastic in them, I would use like something like a jersey maybe to mend them. Or maybe a thread that has some elastic in it too might be a good option. Maybe you could kind of double thread your needle with a piece of cotton and a piece of elastic to give it some more stretch as you're going. Or you could baste it in with some elastic in your sewing machine. If you have an elastic on a bobbin, that might help. And I should also plug Jan's session coming up, which is mending with knits. So they might have some tips for you about mending with stretchier fabrics. Did I see another comment? I have these little pads that stick to you, pushing thread a fingertip instead of a thimble. No thimbles fit my swollen fingertips. Got them from a quilting store. That's an amazing comment. I've seen that there's actually Sashiko specific thimbles. So they actually go like on the palm of your hand or like here so that you can hold underneath and push directly into your palm. So that's a good option as well. And I've seen them as leather thimbles. I've seen them as denim thimbles in stores. So they're a little less common, but the type that kind of wrap around your palm here is really good for this type of mending. And I particularly struggle to find anything that fits my fingertips because I think so much of fabric is like the feel of it. And if I can't feel it properly, it's really hard for me to tell if I'm doing a good job. I feel like I don't feel as well what I'm doing. So I'm gonna match my stitch and go parallel. Again, with that kind of grain of rice, trying to get them a similar size.
I think if you traced the lines on with one of those tracing wheels that has the little like sprockets, like it has little points that stick out,
Yeah,
you can use those points as your pattern sort of,
yeah,
to
that's a
keep
great
your
idea.
stitches the same length.
Yeah, or I've seen some people do where they mark it like on their thumb. That can
Yeah, I
make it
saw that on a
too.
Pinterest thing once. That
Isn't
was
that
fun.
cool?
Yeah, I thought that
Maybe
was really
future
unique.
finger tattoo for me. I can get some stitches here.
Along
It's
the
like,
side of their nail. I thought that was really fun.
oh yeah, totally. So now we're kind of getting a localized smaller stitch here as opposed to what I was doing on the denim was a more broad pattern. This is more utilitarian mending as
So
opposed to
Allie,
mending. Yeah.
Louise is showing one of those palm thimbles.
Yeah, great. We see.
Let's
That's
see. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's perfect.
that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, they're called
Yeah, that's really
Sashiko
neat.
thimbles. Yeah, isn't that
That's
amazing?
great.
That's perfect. I do have to get one of those. And I think it's one of those things like when you're starting, you don't have all the supplies, but eventually I hope to have a whole kit of Sashiko specific supplies. Those would work fantastic. And then where should I bring up my needle? I've kind of come to the end here. So I'm going to go down to the bottom, right next to that other stitch. So you can see now it's becoming a lot more tough and solid here.
Mhm.
And this was also a fun project for me because I was a screen printer too. So this was an old piece that I screen printed. I think my first year in college. So it's kind of a fun way to feature something I did a long time ago that I don't really have any other use for. Sorry, was that another question?
Louise put up a posting about her kit, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna, yeah. So Louise was gonna show the a Sashiko thimble. Hang on, let me just, sorry,
Great.
I'm gonna, ah.
Beautiful.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can actually push the needle through with your
Thank you.
palm, which makes it perfect. Super useful. I think I'm just going to do a stitch up top. It doesn't want to go through all those layers.
The Margaret was saying that the sailmaker palm works too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great idea. Actually, I never thought about a sail needle. That's perfect.
I'd actually like to just, could you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so I just thought you might be curious to see something I worked on in my own stitching, which is not done at all with the elegance of what you're teaching us now. And I would not have understood doing this, that it's pretty close to what you're doing, I guess, a Sashiko stitch. But so this other pair of jeans, there's two on. I have
I'm just
always
gonna
meant.
spotlight you.
Oh, great. Thank
Sorry,
you.
just
Thank you
warning.
for spotlighting.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Susan.
So I've been mending pants forever because I have two sons that from a young age just always blew the knees out of their pants. So
Yeah.
that was just, part of being a mom. Anyway, so these ones, this is a pair of old jeans that I love the way they feel on my skin. And I we gave them a real workout in the garden, which is so they're recently washed. So you can see the mud spots.
Wow.
But anyway, what I'm showing you is
Wow.
patching on patching. So this patch was put on probably about 8 years ago. And it just the whole area started to be degraded. So I guess this one is kind of a combination of patching from above and patching from below.
Yeah.
And I was taught, I was taught to do this, like the idea of patching from below, which I really like, which is like this, specifically this area, because it doesn't interfere with the integrity of what still exists. Like often when I do this, there's lots of threads going horizontal or vertical.
Yeah.
But I was taught how to do it by a dry cleaner sewer.
Oh.
Because before I learned to do it myself, I would take my kids' pants there, and she taught me how to do it, which is to open up the side seam and then go from below. And I'm just looking at the other knee, which is about to be stitched. So now you've inspired me, and I know I need one of your Sashiko. So I've got like your bones in.
Oh, that's nice.
That's beautiful.
Well, that's just getting started, right? Of putting in, right. Anyway, I just wanted to share that it's really nice to be a part of this presentation, so I can upgrade what has thus far been simply utilitarian to make things last. Especially when I know
That's
it's going
beautiful.
right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. That's actually a perfect example of what I would call a Boro textile, where you've stitched over and over. And I think if a Japanese Sashiko stitcher saw that, they would call that a piece of Boro textile. And you've got those many patches, and it's all in indigo. It's just very beautiful. It's exactly what we're talking about. So it's a perfect mix of utilitarian and adding some of your own like personality and decoration on it too. That's exactly what I'm working towards, I would say, with my mending.
Great.
So, thank you so much for sharing.
Mutual exchange. Thank you very much.
So I have a question for everybody.
Sure.
Jeans that are worn like in the crotch area, I've
Yeah,
had
that's
these
one.
jeans that I want to repair, but I've been a bit hesitant about. It's a bit weird to patch, right? Without having it look like you're showing your underwear. I mean, if
Right.
so, any
Yeah.
ideas on how to do a nice mending job on jeans, like in the
If you are
crotch
able
area?
to go through a seam the way Susan just said, I should have mentioned that I did go in through the side seam here
Mhm.
when I originally added this patch. And if there's a way for you to go in through a seam, that's what I would do. Also, you could add like a strip that kind of is small and covers if you want it to be more like invisible mending. If you want it to kind of blend in more, you use like a similar color denim and a similar color thread. Or you can go, the way I would probably go is to make a very large patch that kind of covers a bigger area
Bigger
than just
area.
where the rip is.
Yeah.
And that way it's less like it's just a rip in the crotch. It's more like it's a larger repair.
More deliberate. Yeah.
Yeah, so it might look a little bit more to your taste if it's not just specifically in that one spot.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go from like one side seam to another side seam. That's what I did here. I had a rip that was kind of in the middle. And instead of just repairing just here, I thought it's easier to add on a whole piece of cloth.
Yeah.
So you can see in the back, it just stops here on this pair, whereas the other pair goes a lot larger.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more narrow this way. So like choosing the piece of cloth that accentuates it the best or minimizes it the best, just depending on what visibly suits you.
Yeah.
You can also get like, I've seen on Etsy these beautiful packs of denim swatches that people make. So they have like different colors of denim, different threads.
Oh, okay.
So you can kind of mix and match, or do kind of like a quilt or a patchwork on the piece.
Yeah.
I could add something about this too.
Please, yeah.
Okay, just because as my sons grew up to be young men, the patching in the knees became, frankly, patching their crotch. So I've done quite a few of these in my time. And okay, so what I learned for myself, what works for my guys' jeans, was to turn them inside out and figure out the area, like, eyeball the area that needed to be patched, and cut a much larger patch, not much, but say 1 inch larger than the area I'm going to repair. And then baste it in, and then turn it inside out and see what I have. And I learned not to go over interior seams that overlap. It just doesn't, like, it's really, like, often the needle will break, if I'm doing, because I've learned to, usually I will sew the patch in roughly. I'll baste it, then I'll sew it, and then I'll do some kind of hand stitching on it. And the other question, because it'll fit snugger to their body, rather than having to go over this bumpy, like, middle seam.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say is I almost always keep a portion of any jeans that aren't patchable anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's, I would agree with what Allie has spoken about earlier, which is choosing a fabric that has like the same tooth, the same weight, the same feeling. So, and in that case, then the stretchy jeans, with any degree of stretch, will then get a stretchy patch.
Yeah, that's good.
I think the Goodwill is also a good source, or I should say Value Village, or wherever, garage sales, to get the jean or whatever the fabric is. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. I just have too much experience mending for the wrong reason.
I love
have a
to hear
question
that.
for Allie.
Yeah, sure.
So I did this.
Oh, can we get a spotlight on them so I can see better?
There we go.
Perfect. Oh,
So
beautiful.
I did this, and
Yeah.
little crosses, and that's embroidery floss. And you can see in the middle there where the wear out was. So, and this is the thing, this is the between the thigh wearing out, a huge problem. So that was fine. I thought it was great. Then I did another one on the other side because, oh, look, I discovered the second side was bad too. And the first time I put them on, that happened.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so do I cut my losses? Do I keep adding? What did I do wrong? Was the patch not big enough?
So where was your
The
patch
inside-
exactly located?
On the top. So here are the pants.
Yeah.
And then it was like at the top of the crotch.
Yeah, I think in the case if it's ripping outside of the patch, and I've had that happen too, I think you can either keep going and add more onto it, or you can use a bigger patch initially, or probably what I would do is layer 2 large patches. So layer another patch on top or underneath where that one is, and then kind of stitch them together. So you're having like 2 layers, preventing the ripping.
Right.
But that can happen when the fabric is starting to wear out. I always try to start my mending as soon as I notice any kind of like hole, which in your case you did it right away, and that's perfect. But if you have a piece and you just notice like a little tear starting, that's when you want to immediately start to add the patch or stitch.
I may have been overly optimistic about what was worn and what wasn't worn out.
Yeah, so, it happens. I'm the same way, I think. A little optimistic.
So stick another one in and make it even bigger.
Yeah, add to it and really like accentuate it.
Thank you.
So your stitching is really beautiful too.
I'm practicing, it's hard.
So I got to the end of my thread. So I'm doing a knot, which is just where I pulled it over itself here. This made a loop. Hard to do on camera. And
So
pulling it as tightly as I can to the actual garment here. So it's almost touching, and then snipping and leaving a little bit of a tail here. And this piece from the beginning, trimming that as well, so it doesn't hang below.
Yeah.
So then the back will look similar to the front, but I'm not showing the back bit. People are only going to see this part. So I focus on making the front look nice. And since this is kind of a bandage, we have about, 10 minutes left. So instead of going the whole way across, since the mend is just in this area, I would do similar to Louise has done and add some kind of crosses or X shapes by going horizontally across here. So that's what I'm going to work on for the next few minutes.
Is that for the knees of your other jeans as well, Allie?
Yes, I would definitely go horizontally as well. You want like many layers of stitch to keep it as strong as possible, or you could do them one way, and when it starts to get worn, you can add the second layer too. You don't need to do it all at once. If you want to like wear the pants and get back to your life, it's okay to add it. Like,
sorry, Jacqueline has a question.
sure.
Oh, sorry, I showed up so late trying to wrangle a 3-year-old. I've got Paw Patrol on the background for like 30 minutes. So I have this. I've had the same problem, I guess, you know, just like the tearing on the edges of my jeans, and I guess knees are just, you know, terrible. But I have this piece.
Yeah.
And I don't have any linen to repair it. And it's torn just along the seam.
Right.
So one side still has it, just torn with the serger there. What would you suggest? Like, ideally, I don't want it to be like a super obvious, but I don't really want it to lose too much of it. But I do want to do like a colored stitching over the top, but I don't want the patch to be as, so I'm not sure how to clean that up, or if I should just kind of take my losses and make it a little bit smaller. See if I can make it.
I don't think you cut your losses here. I think it looks great. So that edge or that seam, that it ripped upon a seam, right? Like along a seam line.
Yeah, so this one did here, but the stitches definitely took away all of the.
Yeah, so there's nowhere where you could go back into your original stitch to pull it back together.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'd probably try to fold the edges in. So it's almost like a hem, like and then kind of stitch it back together, almost like a surgeon would do with a scar. So you want to kind of stitch along that edge. Yeah, and then once it's kind of attached that way, then I would add some decorative stitching to the top just to reinforce it. So first the stitch that's almost like basting to attach it back together, and then a decorative stitch or a patch on top to keep it strong.
Since it's such a large, like an open weave, is there anything or any specific interfacing or anything that you'd suggest to put underneath it to like kind of keep it a little bit more, like make it last a little bit longer?
Yeah, maybe you could actually use fusible webbing or a washable interfacing. So maybe the washout kind you could stitch on top as much as you like, and then wash out the interfacing. Because it has some kind of a plasticizer or a polymer in it, so when that washes away, it should actually help kind of strengthen that original fabric. But then you could stitch, you know, with your machine as much as you want, or with your hands as much as you want, without worrying about actually the look of the interfacing when you wash it out later.
Okay, thanks so much for your help.
I hope that helps.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, and also I just would like to say, since this is such a short teach-in today, you know, we only have an hour and a half together. If you have any more questions after this is through, you can always email me, or I'm sure Jan as well, who's done the other sessions, and we'd be happy to answer more questions. We'd be happy to see images of your work and know how you're doing, if you like the techniques or anything. And also, I'd be happy to provide more resources. So we're going to edit this recording and then send it to everyone. So you'll have a resource afterwards if you want to go back and look at what we talked about, or look at my list from the beginning of my different books and things that helped me out the most. Yeah, I hope that's helpful, because it's so hard when you only have such a short amount of time. So I'm going to show what the horizontal would look like. And I come in right next to the stitch. And I've already, of course, waxed my thread. You can see it's a little bit white where I waxed it. And I'm going to dip out of every second stitch here, because they're quite close together.
Very neat.
And so tough, but when I pull through, you know, it's creating a small kind of pattern there, so it looks a little bit more intentional. And I'm gonna alternate, so it'll be kind of like a knots and crosses thing. So I've gone right next to the stitch, so it's not super visible where I came in.
Sorry, Leah, can we get this bigger? Can we get Allie bigger? Because right now we're seeing, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
That's better. That's much better. Yeah, that's great, Allie.
So I'm kind of alternating. So, you know, eventually when I finish the piece, it would be, you know, X's kind of going in a little bit of a zigzag kind of pattern here. And the first few times I did this, it was not very pleasing to look at, because I'm not really an embroiderer. It's just something I do as a pastime. So don't be too worried if it doesn't look, you know, aesthetically amazing your first few times. It's okay. Well, it wasn't the original purpose of the stitch. Of course, it was the utilitarian thing. And it's all about having a respect and joy for your garments.
And being sustainable is so important now.
Yeah, we want to take care of the things we have and show others that we appreciate it. I think part of the beauty of having visible mending is that when people see it, they know that you care about your clothing. It's like a statement, almost like a political statement. You're telling people, I care about this and you should care about it too. And I think the more people you kind of share that with, the technique will become more popular and others will maybe take something out of that. So we've got some kind of messy around here.
Oops.
So now I would say it's like 3 times stronger or more than it was when I started. It feels so much more solid. And what you're doing with the needle here is you're actually weaving, you're actually creating kind of a warp and weft as you go in and out. So you're replicating on a larger scale what the fabric is, kind of a plain weave. And these garments will be strong enough, to go in the washing machine. You won't have to worry about taking them as a delicate item because they're very strongly reinforced. Whereas more hidden mending techniques, while they can be quite beautiful, they're sometimes more delicate and you have to treat them with more care. So this is, perfect for, like we were talking about before, your jeans that you wear outside, your gardening clothes, the things that you really do put the most wear on. These are the things that I wear while I'm dyeing. So, when I stain them, I can repatch over the stains and they just become part of the garment. They're not like something to be ashamed of. Then they have their kind of own story. So they don't look messy, they look purposeful, which I think can be so important. This linen is tough. Okay. So we've got kind of a little band-aid. It's always so much tougher at that seam line. So that could be a good reason to baste it with your machine too, just so it has that extra enforcement. Sashiko traditionally refers to hand stitching, but in our kind of modern contemporary times, I think it's totally okay to use your machine. You could use your zigzag stitch. You could, stitch in other areas. You could even, with your machine, kind of zigzag back and forth and do that with machine thread. You're not limited by the technique. Just kind of put the technique in your pocket as something and then use it in the way that kind of pleases you, It's gonna add a stitch here because it looks like there's something missing. Can't quite tell you. Can't quite tell you why, but I think it needs a little stitch there. So now it's kind of fun. It's kind of its own pattern. What does Sashiko mean? So the word itself means little stabs. It just refers to repairing itself. The kind of translation of the word has been debated a little bit by people. But it's really, in Japanese, the same as in English, it does really refer to the actual technique of repair. It's a translated word from little stabs, but when you use the word in Japanese, it's also just referring to the technique. I'm gonna do probably a few more stitches before this thread is all out. And just finish off here. Here we go. And add a couple more along the bottom.
Allie, you'll be sharing the slides as well, right?
Oh yeah,
the recording.
absolutely.
Oh well, it's the same thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I can send the slides as a separate document too. That might be helpful for folks just to have that like written document with the written resource files. And I always, I always like to suggest and plug our Etsy artists. There are plenty of Canadian artists that sell these dyed threads, the needles. I bought mine from an Etsy seller. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I did purchase my Sashiko needles and threads from a local Etsy seller. So be sure to check those people before you check your big box stores, please. Because they really care about the craft and they'll support us a lot longer than some of those other stores will. A little bit around the edge. And that was the perfect.
So it's just a nice comment from Susan Meggs. Allie, wear mended clothes without shame or hiding the mend is a form of consumer resistance to fast fashion.
Yes,
so thank
exactly.
you for helping
Thank
to make
you.
this fashionable again.
I'm so glad. So here, instead of doing kind of a knot, I like to suggest too, there's a kind of alternative. I don't really want two knots here at the bottom of my leg. That's pretty itchy and not fun. So what I usually do is I do a couple stitches and they're going to be inside. They're not going all the way through to the front. They're just going to be a couple here. So then your thread is fully secured. You can pull your thread back through those as well. And there's really no chance of it coming out. And then of course you don't have your two unfortunate knots right next to each other.
Ali, are you going to show us the final, when you finish the short, show it to us?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can definitely, I like to post photos of my mending on my Instagram account, which is instagram.com/witchdyes, WITCHDYES. So I will share an image there when I'm all finished, but you can kind of see what I'm working towards here. And this is almost like a bandage. So I'm probably not going to continue this the whole way along, probably just this area. So you can see some stitches kind of outside of the lines. It's a little bit unfocused, but there's some stitches outside of where the patch is, some inside, and it covers this fraying here. That was my original problem. And where the seam was coming detached, as we talked about earlier, you want to sometimes go in and strengthen your seams. So it's kind of unsightly underneath, but on top, I think it looks pretty fashionable and pretty fun. And of course, these large patches I've done a long time ago. In person, they're a little bit closer to the black shade of the jeans. So that's just some black cotton I had lying around. And I've done just your kind of typical tucking under, sewing all the corners, and then doing a running stitch the whole way around. And then in the top corner, you can see where I've done another little bandage area up here. So black on black. But I think it would look really cool also if you did a colored or like a white on black would look really cool, you know, or combining kind of your patches and your thread colors. Does anyone else have projects we can show off before we finish the presentation? I'd really love to see what you're all working on.
I guess I do.
Beautiful.
The first thing I did, I think I made the rows way too wide, but I worked on these inside out so that my like little baby hole that was forming could still have a patch underneath.
Beautiful.
So I have the denim back there, but very basic. And then the one I'm working on right now is a little like mushroom patch.
Oh my gosh, I love that fabric. That pattern is
cute
delightful.
Thank you.
How sweet is that?
Yeah, I bought these jeans from Topshop and like they came completely ragged and I just stick my foot through these every time. So yeah,
that's amazing.
That's what I've been doing.
That's like exactly what I was talking about. I have a lot of fabrics that I've dyed and screen printed that I really particularly like the print that I made, but it doesn't serve me anymore. It's not something I want to use in any projects. So especially if you have like really cool quilting fabrics or your own fabrics that you're really proud of, that this is the way to show them off and this is the fun way. I do think it starts a discussion about mending with others. When they see that you care so much about your clothes, it's going to have that lasting impact on other people as well. I'm really happy to have so many of you participating today and with such positivity and such a good spirit for taking care of our clothes. I think that's really important. So yeah, I'd just like to extend a thanks to all of you for working with me and having kind of a participatory, almost like a sewing circle here where we all got to work together.
It was great.
But I hope to do in person when we have more in-person things. I would love to have some of you and do like an in-person sewing circle would be amazing. I love that. Is that an apron or a dress, Naomi?
No, it's a favorite sundress. I've had it for decades and it started to fall apart and now it won't.
That's amazing.
Keep wearing it.
That's great. Oh, I'm so excited. If you continue these projects, if you mend your own garments, I'd also be really happy if you email them to me or share them on social media and tag me or tag the Textile Museum. We want to see what you're working on and help out if you have any more questions about things, because it doesn't just end, today. It's like an ongoing lifetime thing. And I truly treat my Instagram as like a place of education. So when I go on there, I am going on there to read my DMs and help people with projects the way I would want to be helped. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And that's what I enjoy doing.
Thanks so much, Allie. This was good.
I'm so glad you all enjoyed yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions, and I'll be sending that recording as soon as I can.